The receptionist looked at me with disdain, unaware that I owned the hotel chain. At 36 years old, I'm the owner of a hotel chain that I expanded after my father passed it down to me in my late 20s. I've grown the business, establishing locations in other states, strategically near highways and tourist attractions. I have several managers in different states running my hotels, and I visit each of them throughout the year. After my wife recently gave birth to our youngest child, I decided to take my family on a road trip vacation. My wife and I always prefer driving over flying because she has anxiety about flying. I wanted her to relax after her pregnancy, so we planned a road trip to a beach in Florida, one of our favorite destinations. The journey was long, but we managed to enjoy ourselves with our kids and newborn without any irritation. I planned to stop at my hotels along the way, so I could spend time with my family while also checking on the establishments, saving myself from having to revisit them in a few months. After hours of driving, I decided to stop at my hotel in Alabama and stay overnight. We arrived at 3 p.m. and went to the reception desk. The receptionist glanced up from her computer, and I immediately noticed her disinterested expression as we approached. I politely requested 2 adjoining rooms with a view, if possible, trying to maintain a cheerful demeanor despite being tired and irritated from the long drive. Without taking her eyes off her screen, she responded with an attitude. "Do you have a reservation?" "No, I didn't make a reservation," I admitted. "We decided to stop here impulsively as part of our road trip tradition," I added, laughing to lighten the mood. Her demeanor remained unchanged. She let out a long sigh and looked at me with mild irritation and disinterest. "Well, without a reservation, I can't guarantee anything special. It's peak season, you know." I apologized, agreeing that she was right and admitting I should have planned ahead. However, she sighed again, shook her head, and mumbled something under her breath. I noticed and asked if there was an issue. Her eyes widened, perhaps surprised by my question. Instead of apologizing, she straightened up and responded defensively. "It's just that we have so many guests, and it's hard to accommodate everyone's requests without proper planning. You people showing up without a reservation are inconsiderate to those working here." I was shocked by her words, but I kept my composure and said I understood. I acknowledged she was likely stressed from the busy season and admitted my mistake in not making a reservation. However, the way she treated me in front of my family was unacceptable. I took a deep breath, trying to manage my frustration. I didn't want to make a scene, especially with my family watching. "I appreciate your honesty," I said in a measured tone. "I apologize for any inconvenience our stop may have caused." I then asked if there were any other rooms available. She said they had only 1 room left, but it wasn't adjoining or with a view. I accepted and paid for the room. She handed the room key card to my wife, who went ahead with the kids while I stayed behind. As my family walked away, I turned back to the receptionist, who still looked disinterested. "You know," I began in a calm voice, "I've been in the hospitality business for quite some time." She continued staring at her computer, ignoring me entirely. I couldn't believe it and had finally had enough. I stared at her for a moment, feeling the anger building in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I decided to hold back. This wasn't the time to lose my composure. After all, my family was upstairs in the room, and I knew my wife didn't need any more stress after everything she'd been through recently. But something inside me wanted to react. This wasn't just about dealing with a rude receptionist. It was about someone who clearly made it a habit to belittle people, unaware of who they might be. "You're right. Not planning ahead and making a reservation was my mistake," I said, keeping my tone controlled but firm. "But you know, in the hospitality business, how we treat people is our hallmark." She glanced up for a second, perhaps realizing I wasn't just any regular guest. But, as if on reflex, she looked back down at her computer, pretending my presence was irrelevant. I left the desk and went to the room, trying to convince myself to let it go. The night passed, and while my family slept, I couldn't. I sat in the armchair by the window, thinking. I had dedicated my life to building a hotel chain that prided itself on exceptional service. How dare this woman treat any guest like that, let alone the owner of it all? By morning, I decided to act. My family was excited to continue the trip, and my wife, ever the kind soul, suggested we go downstairs for breakfast at the hotel restaurant. We headed down together, but before reaching the dining area, I told them to go ahead, mentioning I had something to take care of. I walked back to the front desk. The receptionist was there again, wearing the same look of disdain as the day before. "Good morning," I started, keeping a polite tone. She didn't even bother to respond, merely nodding slightly as if acknowledging my presence was an effort. "I'd like to speak to the manager," I said, now more serious. She looked up, crossing her arms. "He's not here right now. Whatever you need, you can talk to me." I smiled, but not out of happiness. It was pure irony. "Are you sure about that?" I asked, because I think the manager would be very interested in hearing how guests are being treated here. She frowned, but said nothing. Feeling it was time to reveal my position, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my business card, and slid it across the counter toward her. "I'm the owner of this hotel and the entire chain. I think you might want to rethink what you just said." Her expression changed instantly. Her relaxed posture was replaced by visible tension. She picked up the card, read my name, and looked back at me, pale. "Sir, I didn't know," she stammered, but I cut her off. "Of course you didn't. But that's exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The manager was called in a hurry. Unlike the receptionist, he was a professional man, visibly concerned about the situation. After a long conversation in his office, I explained what had happened and made it clear that this incident couldn't be ignored. It was a matter of principle. I wanted every employee to understand that respect was the foundation of our brand. The manager assured me the issue would be addressed, and before leaving, I made it clear I would return. I left the hotel feeling I'd taken the right action, but at the same time, something didn't sit well with me. I knew this receptionist wasn't the only one. How many more people like her were damaging the experiences of our guests? As we continued our trip, the thought kept nagging at me. I realized this wasn't just about one isolated incident. Maybe it was time to conduct surprise audits at my other hotels. If this was happening at one of my establishments, what could be going on at the others? And what if the problem was bigger than I thought? This question kept echoing in my mind throughout the drive as I looked out the window, watching the changing scenery. When we finally reached the beach, my wife was happy, and my kids were running along the sand, but I still couldn't relax. The decision was made. As soon as our trip was over, I'd begin a rigorous investigation process at every hotel I owned. I knew this might uncover some unpleasant truths, but it was necessary. Every guest who stepped into one of my hotels deserved to feel valued, and I wouldn't rest until I was certain that was the reality. The following week, I decided to return to the hotel in Alabama, this time alone. My family was safe and comfortable at home, and I needed to focus entirely on resolving what had happened. This wasn't just about that one receptionist. It was about the larger impact such behavior could have on the reputation of my hotel chain. Deep down, I knew the problem extended beyond a single employee. There was something wrong with the management of that location. I arrived at the hotel unannounced, posing as a regular guest. This time, I kept my presence low-key, wanting to observe how staff interacted with other guests. I sat quietly in the lobby for hours, watching everything unfold. It didn't take long to see that the problem was systemic. The receptionist who had treated me poorly wasn't alone in her attitude. Other staff members during that shift shared the same air of disdain and impatience. I saw guests being ignored, requests being handled carelessly, and even some borderline sarcastic comments. As I mentally took notes on everything, the manager eventually appeared. A middle-aged man in a slightly disheveled suit. He offered 4 smiles as he greeted what appeared to be more important guests. He walked past me without noticing, too preoccupied with his phone. That confirmed my suspicions. The root of the issue started at the top. The next day, I called a meeting with all the hotel staff. At first, no one knew who I was, but as I introduced myself, I saw the shock spread across their faces. The manager, in particular, looked visibly uncomfortable, fiddling nervously with his tie as I spoke. "I'm here because what happened last week was unacceptable," I began, my tone calm but firm. "The behavior I experienced and what I observed yesterday does not represent the values of our brand. Every guest who walks through these doors should be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of who they are or what they've done." I locked eyes with the receptionist who had treated me poorly. She sat in the back, avoiding my gaze. I continued, turning my attention to the manager. I want to make it clear that while every individual is responsible for their actions, a system's failure reflects directly on its leadership. The room fell silent. Some employees exchanged uncertain glances, while others looked skeptical. As the manager, you are responsible for training, supervising, and setting the example for this team. What I witnessed yesterday and experienced as a guest shows that this leadership has been lacking. I turned fully toward the manager. He tried to interject, but I raised my hand to stop him. Effective immediately, you are no longer part of this team, I announced. His expression shifted from surprise to indignation. Sir, with all due respect, I don't think this is fair, he began. I have years of experience, and experience without commitment to the right values means nothing. I interrupted, my voice unwavering. I am not here to compromise on the quality of what I have worked so hard to build. The manager stood, still trying to argue, but I didn't give him the chance. He left the room, muttering something about loyalty and unfairness. Once the door closed, I turned to the rest of the staff. I know some decisions are hard to accept, but I'm not here to please anyone. I'm here to ensure that this hotel is a place where every guest feels welcome and valued. My gaze landed on the receptionist. And as for you, I said, pointing directly at her, your attitude was the most egregious. You had the chance to redeem yourself when you learned who I was, but you chose to continue your disrespect. That is something I cannot tolerate. Effective immediately, you are also dismissed. She turned pale, opening her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She gathered her things silently and left. After they were gone, the atmosphere in the room was tense. Many employees looked uneasy, and some even murmured among themselves. One of them, more bold than the others, stood up and said, "With all due respect, sir, this seems extreme." They were good at their jobs. I took a deep breath before responding. Good employees are not just those who complete tasks. They are those who do so with respect, empathy, and professionalism. If anyone here believes what you saw from them was acceptable, then maybe this isn't the right place for you either. The room fell silent again. In the days that followed, I implemented immediate changes. I brought in a new manager from another hotel in the chain, someone I trusted to restore the culture of respect and excellence that should exist there. I also organized mandatory training sessions for the entire staff, making it clear that the behavior I witnessed would never be tolerated again. Despite some initial resistance, many employees began to see the improvements. Guests started commenting on the more welcoming atmosphere, and the hotel's reviews began to improve. However, I knew the work was far from over. There were other hotels to audit, and each one could be hiding similar problems. I left the hotel in Alabama with a sense of accomplishment, but also the realization that this was just the tip of the iceberg. The next step would be to visit another state, another hotel, and continue ensuring that the values I fought so hard to uphold were being honored. I knew this battle would be long, but I was prepared to face whatever was necessary. After all, what was at stake wasn't just my reputation. It was the very essence of what I had built.